Hey, Nathan here from PHStudios, and welcome back to another podcast episode. And in this episode, there are a few things I want to discuss, a few questions people have asked in the forums, since I said I would be recording this today. So people had a chance to ask some questions, and there was a big XNA news this week that I'm sure some of you are aware of, that I want to discuss that first. So there's a news article going on, and this is one of the sites that covers it, Polygon. And the news article says Microsoft has no plans for future versions of XNA software, will not phase out DirectX. Now, I go to a lot of development communities, and everybody seems to immediately think that means XNA is dead. And while they don't plan on future versions, if you look at the last line, the last paragraph here, it says XNA Game Studio remains a supported tool set for developing games in Xbox 360, Windows, and Windows Phone. The representative added, many developers have found financial success creating Xbox Live indie games using XNA. However, there are no plans for future versions of the XNA product. So the first quote here, XNA Game Studio remains a supported tool set for developing games for Xbox 360, Windows, and Windows Phone. So we can't really say XNA is dead. Yeah, the last line here says, however, there are no plans for future versions of the product. Just what we thought all along, there might not be an XNA 5, but XNA 4, 3, 2, 1 will still be around for you to use. So I wouldn't call XNA dead, we just won't get more versions of it at this time. Now, they could be working on a successor to XNA, and hopefully, if they do work on something like that, it would be cool to have a C++ version of that. I just think that would be kind of cool. But who knows for sure what they plan to do with the next Xbox, and if they even plan to have indie games on that. But we'll see when that releases. So what does that mean for PHStudios? As you know, my site is pretty much based on, pretty much all my game tutorials are XNA. Now, when I created the first podcast episode, I listed some new tutorial series I plan to work on for the website. And those included MonoGame, maybe go into straight Objective-C and use Coco's 2D framework to, develop for iOS. So XNA will still be used on the website for educational stuff. My artificial intelligence series, there's no reason for me to create a pure DirectX code if I just want to discuss the algorithm for artificial intelligence. There's no reason for me to spend more time than needed. That's what makes XNA so perfect, is that I can just create the algorithm and not worry about setting up the viewport, getting all the pure DirectX state set up, and all that stuff, setting up the handles. XNA does all that in the background for us. So that's what makes XNA so great. So for the artificial intelligence series, the random tutorials, I will finish the tower defense game tutorials. Those will still be in XNA. And pretty much most of the tutorials will be in XNA still, because it's still a great educational experience if you're going into game development, and that's what the site is about. To get you comfortable with game development, then you can take what you learn and once you do that, you can then focus on, all right, I want to move to DirectX. How do I create the handles? How do I set up the states and all that stuff? How do I work with C++ and DirectX to do all this stuff? So instead of worrying about the game and then the implementation both together, we're doing the game logic with XNA, so you get comfortable with how games work, and then you can move on to DirectX or whatever you want to use. Okay, with that being said, there will be new tutorial series coming out. One of the most requested ones will be 3D models. How do you create a game in 3D? That will initially be in XNA, probably for maybe the whole year will be XNA, just to get you comfortable with 3D. As most of you know, I'm not a big fan of 3D development. I find a lot of the 2D, if done right, I find 2D games more artistic looking, more interesting looking. You know, we've seen a lot of 3D games, and when a 3D game is, when you're a beginner in 3D development, and you'll probably see this in my first few 3D games, it'll probably look horrible. But for 2D development, it's a lot easier to create very nice looking graphics in a 2D plane. It's very difficult to create a great looking 3D model if you're just starting out. So that's why I prefer 2D. I've been using Photoshop for almost 10 years now. It's about 9 years I've been using Photoshop. So I could just open Photoshop and create graphics. I mean, it did not take me very long at all to create the entire tower defense graphic, all the graphics for the tower defense. I'm not that familiar with 3D modeling, so it'll take me a little while to, create a model, and then how to texture that model. And then I'll discuss all this in the tutorials, but for the first, dozen or so, do not expect amazing 3D experience. Just expect basic models, and then as I get more comfortable, I can try to, spend weeks on one model to make it look nice. Alright, so that 3D series will cover everything I discussed. How do you create the models? How do you texture the models? When you're done with the model, how do you use that in XNA? And that will be probably the rest of the year will be just XNA for 3D. Later this year, XNA is still it's still the perfect thing to use if you want to target the most audiences as possible with ease of use. It's very easy to use XNA versus creating a DirectX or some other implementation. It's very easy to create a game with XNA. Now, XNA, you can develop that for Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8 in desktop mode, Xbox 360, Windows Phone. That's, with little modification, you can create a game for all those platforms. You create a game for keyboard and mouse, then you want to port that to the Xbox with a little modification for mostly just the input, some other things here and there, of course, but you can create a copy just for the Xbox and a copy for touch for Windows Phone. And then if you want to take that a step farther, once you have the game built for those platforms, you can use MonoGame to port to iOS, Mac OS X, Android. So XNA is still a perfect tool to use if you don't want to complicate your life with all the complexities with a dedicated, directly DirectX working game engine, stuff like that. So with that being said, later this year, I will be discussing Windows 8 Metro modern UI and how to create games in that way. I'll be starting a DirectX series. I'll be starting one of the next complete games. It won't be XNA. It will be C# with XAML. And that will be a board game or a card game. And then we can use XAML with C# and create that, and it'll be on the modern user interface. The tiles, we can just develop an app. Then you can put that on the store. People can buy it, or I think you can put stuff for free on there. As you can tell, I'm not really a big fan of Windows 8, so I'm pretty sure you can provide free stuff on there. But anyway, all that will be discussed later this year. A DirectX series with DirectX 11 enhancements and so on. So it'll be a brand new series for DirectX. One of the next complete games will be the C# with XAML, probably a board game or a card game. And then hopefully later this year there will be a MonoGame series coming out as well. So that's the first item. And I apologize for the video. It's pretty much not going to change throughout the whole recording. This is pretty much for discussion and audio. And I would go into the postings here, but I know some people are, and I don't want to do this my own. Since I'm an administrator, I see everybody's IP address. So if I go into one of the posts here, you'll see the IP address for that member. Now, they said I can say their names, their membership names, but I still don't want to go to the post and display the IP address. Okay, so now that we discuss XNA, Deuce Ocelot asks, what is the timeline for the site development, and when can chat and subscription be used? And then David also wanted to second that question and want me to discuss that. Okay, so timeline of the site development. I released the site, and I mostly wanted to get the community going and then just get, posts flowing, get people registered and stuff like that, get familiar with the new layout, and then I would focus on the issues later on. So the chat is currently down. It's open for admins, and the reason it's down because it needs to be skinned still. It's white. It has some issues. You can't really read the text. And I just need to change the design a little bit to work with the dark feel for it. So that is why the chat is down, and that should be out within the couple weeks. Store, you'll be able to purchase subscriptions, and then you'll be able to go to the downloads, and then download those files that you have access to. So when do we expect that? That will be in a couple weeks as well. So let's just set a hard deadline. My birthday is March 3rd, and I plan to do very little that whole week. I might take the whole week off of work for that as well. So I do not plan to do anything after that for quite a while. If, I might post a response here and there, but I don't plan on working on any major changes to the site at that time. So, let's say March 3rd is a Sunday. So let's just say March 3rd. And I'm writing this down too to give me a note. March 3rd, that's about 3 weeks away or so. March 3rd, all this will be out. You'll be able to purchase subscriptions. You'll be able to purchase subscriptions. And view the chat. Thumbnails will also be fixed by this date. Okay, so I just wrote myself a note. So, March 3rd. If, 2 weeks, you can access chat, that's great, but March 3rd will be the definite date where you can do that. And then March 4th, that's the Monday to the Friday, I just won't be on that much for my birthday. I'll probably take the whole week and just do absolutely nothing. Play some games maybe. Okay. So that's a question Deuce Ocelot and David asked. And then, again, for the subscriptions, you go to the store. If you don't have any, you can buy it there. Or I think if you go to your menu here, you can click Upgrade Account. I think both ways will work. Okay, Thorn asks, is it viable to trade XNA for Unity and Photon? Or do you suggest MonoGame all the way? And that was in a forum posting, and I replied, why not have both? So I'm not a big fan of Unity, but if a lot of people want me to do a couple videos on it, I don't want to create 500 videos on Unity and Photon. But if you just want me to create some general topics on it, I can look into that and maybe create a Unity series later this year. But I do suggest MonoGame because, like I said, you can use XNA as a base for your game. Target all the Windows platforms, Xbox 360 and Windows Phone, and then use MonoGame to port to several other platforms. Okay, so as we get later into the year, I will release more information on all these series, like the 3D series, DirectX series, the next complete game for the modern UI, and then maybe a Unity and Photon series. Okay, the next topic on the list is I am in need of a few moderators for the site. As you see, we already have a topic going on asking questions about that. So, I'm mostly looking for people who are very active on the site, who have a lot of posts, and can... I'm not asking you to know how Envision PowerBoard moderator CP works. I really don't know how it works since they changed from the way it was in 3.0 to 3.4, and I'm an administrator, so I know how the admin side works, but not the moderator side. So I'm not asking you to know how to use Envision PowerBoard moderator. So if you're an active member on the site and you are interested in keeping the community in line, just post in the general discussion board about that and say, hey, I'm interested, and then I'll pick a few members. Remember, activity will be the thing I look for most on that. If you're active on the site, you know how to follow the rules. And the rules aren't that complicated, so there was only a couple forums that I allow guests to post in. And there's already a few spam posts been posted. So you just need to check out for that. When I'm at my other job, I don't have time to get on here and delete spam posts. But moderators will have that capability to see if it's spam and mark it as deleted. And then you go to the admin CP. And if you accidentally delete something, and then, like this one, this is a spam post, you can restore the post if somebody says, hey, you accidentally deleted my post or topic. And then you can just restore it. Yeah, see, there's an IP address. That's why I don't want to go into the topics. I know some people are worried about their IP address being displayed, and I just don't want to create any issues with that. Okay, so that's the application process. Just post in the general discussion if you're interested in it. Just post moderator. Just have moderator in the topic of the post, and in the body just say I'm interested, and I'll just choose a couple of members that are very active and can look like they can get the job done. And then you'll have access to the moderation board after that. I'm also looking for another administrator, and that will be a strict. It'll be more difficult to get the administration position because you can do a lot of damage if you're, if you want to. Okay, now the final thing I want to discuss is the group project. Obviously, with the website being down, that's pretty much all I've been doing the last few months. So I have not done any of the group project changes or anything like that. Let's see, the hard deadline is March 3rd for when I should have the chat up, the purchase subscriptions feature, and the thumbnails on the homepage. Those should all be up by March 3rd. So let's say after I get everything up on the website, March 3rd at the latest, and then I'll probably take a week for my birthday. And then after that, I'll get the group project started again. I will be posting a lot of topics on what the group project is, how far did we get before the site went down, what still needs to be done, and that kind of thing. So if you're interested in participating in a group project, it is XNA 4.0. It will be just for fun. And then we can discuss features to add. It's basically a modification of my tower defense to, instead of having towers, we'll have traps, and we're like in a closed off area, and then we fight waves of enemies using traps instead of towers. Those type of things. And then there are more details later on. I don't want to spend 20 minutes discussing the group project. I'll do that at a later date. But if you're interested in a group project at all, just let me know. It will be just for fun. And then we'll go from there. Alright, so I think that's it for this podcast episode. I think the next podcast episode I'll be playing Minecraft again, so you're not sitting at a static screen here. But I just wanted to go through like the chat pages, store, and just go through those pages a little bit, and I wanted to show you the article on here. And I'll link to this article in the YouTube description and in the forum posting about that. Okay. Now next year, I might, depending on what happens, I might go to straight DirectX or some other thing like that. But for this year, we need to get all this stuff finished. You know, the artificial intelligence series, the tower defense game series. You know, start a few series for 3D, get you guys and myself comfortable with 3D development and all that stuff. Then, once we get things rolling, we can play around with, should we keep on doing XNA next year or move to something else? And then that'll also help if I have a DirectX Basic series, that'll help the transition. Okay, now, that's it for this podcast episode. I hope the visual was not too boring. I just had a couple questions, and I wanted to get those thrown out there. Alright, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.